Good Wednesday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Plenty to talk about. Caris LeVert will make his Cavaliers debut tonight against the Spurs. Evan Dammarell from the Locked on Cavs podcast will join us a little later. We'll talk plenty of Cavs. We begin by talking Browns Super Bowl Sunday this weekend, and a couple of the elite offenses in the NFL are in it. Let's take a look at this graph, and it is titled Championships Are Decided by Offense. Offense wins championships, and this is a graph that shows you since 2011, 19 of the 22 teams that have played in the Super Bowl were top 10 offenses. So all but 3 of them. You see the Broncos back in 2015, that's the Von Miller as the MVP of the Super Bowl, one of the lone stragglers. But let's welcome in the D-Man, Dennis Manoloff, WTAM News Radio 1100, 106.9 FM. And D-Man, I know you have been singing this song for quite a while. There it is, black and white graphically. Offense wins championships.
Yeah, nobody's saying that a good defense isn't important, and it definitely helps. And there have been Super Bowls where the defense clearly won the game. I mean, just a few years ago when the Rams were held to, was it 3 loss to New England? But for the most part, you have to be able to score, not only as you get through the regular season, but as you get into the postseason and try to have success in the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. And just this year, I mean, you think about the high-powered offense directed by quality quarterbacks, Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati. I think about the Chargers, who didn't even get in, and their prolific offense, but they were right there, and lost out in the final game of the regular season. On the NFC side, the Buccaneers and the Rams and the Packers. I mean, you just have to have quality offenses if you really want to have a shot in today's NFL.
And again, one of the reasons is because quite honestly, the rules are tilted towards the offense because the NFL figured it out. Offense is exciting. Fans want to see a lot of points. That's what draws eyes to the game.
Yes, and related to that, Dave, there's a reason why the NFL bends over backwards to protect the quarterback because they know that the quarterback is the meal ticket. The quarterback is the key to these high-powered offenses. So you're going to make sure you're going to do the best you can to protect the star quarterback who's directing, a tremendous show back there. And I don't blame the NFL for doing that. I'd rather have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, and I know Brady might retire. He says he's going to. Who knows? He left a little crease open. But Matt Stafford and Herbert and Carr and Mahomes and Burrow and Allen, I'd rather see those guys than their backups. So good for the NFL for protecting them. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, rules are set up where receivers can do a lot of things that maybe they couldn't have done unencumbered, 25 years ago. So you better have a really good quarterback, and you better have dynamic pass catchers. You can talk all you want about, we got good running backs and we're ground and pound. That sounds great, but in the end, in the 21st century in the NFL, you better be able to throw the ball and you better be able to score.
And we've talked about it quite a bit. Those are 2 of the reasons that the Browns were sitting home watching the playoffs this year. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Oh, yes. How you doing? This is Michael calling to talk about Baker Mayfield. I just don't understand why our Cleveland reporters like y'all are scared to say what the problem really is. The problem is Baker Mayfield. Anybody can be better than Baker Mayfield. I was watching y'all show a couple of days ago. Didn't nobody know how good Matthew Stafford was until he's doing what he's doing now. because he didn't win in Detroit. So we can't say that it has to be 100% for sure because nobody knew. Everybody was questioning that trade when it happened. But Baker is our problem. Yes, he had the shoulder injury, but the shoulder has nothing to do with his decision-making and his pre- and post-snap reads. And 4 years in a job, anybody else would have been fired by now. So I just think it's time to move on from him. And he's causing too much distraction for what? He's not a top-flight quarterback. We sitting here arguing over an average to below-average quarterback. And what other city does that for an average or below-average quarterback? Thank you.
All right. As always, we appreciate the voicemail of Truth and Reason. And D-Man, there's a number of things. The injury, certainly. Decision-making needs to be better. The wide receiving core needs to be a whole lot better. And I'm one of the guys that was guilty of thinking it was going to be a whole lot better than it was. And quite honestly, the play calling needs to be better. The scheme needs to alter towards passing a little bit more. But there's a number of things. It's not all Baker Mayfield's fault. It is partly Baker Mayfield's fault. I don't know how much. That's the question.
That's true. A lot to unpack from the voicemail of Truth and Reason, and well thought out call with a lot of opinions and a lot of assessments. But a couple that stuck out to me. Number one, I don't think anybody in the Cleveland media is afraid to say that Baker Mayfield is the problem. I know plenty of people who have said it in the Cleveland media. I've said that Baker Mayfield was part of the problem. But I don't think he's exclusively the problem. But that's not me being afraid to say that. That's me saying what Dave, you just mentioned, that there are other slices to the blame pie. And as far as the left shoulder injury not affecting the pre and at snap reads, okay, I'll listen to that, but I won't quite listen to the left shoulder shouldn't affect his thought process as he's dropping back to pass, because I do think that his accuracy was compromised by that lead shoulder being as injured as it was. And when your accuracy is not there, you are going to hesitate to throw passes you otherwise would have thrown. And so I think, yes, it is baked into the cake a little bit. That said, I do not want to sound like an excuse maker for Baker Mayfield. I never have been. The bottom line with Baker in 2021 is he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL by virtually all metrics. And here's the key, Dave. When you make the decision or the team decides with you that you are going to play, once you play, you are judged by your performance on the field. You can't sit there and say, well, you know what, I played, but I was banged up. I played, but I had this injury or that injury. No. That's not how the NFL works, because 99.9% of these guys go out there with injuries, virtually from the start of the season. So Baker was not good in 2021. He needs to bounce back. Is he capable? Maybe, because in 2020 he was pretty good under Kevin Stefanski. In his rookie year, he threw the ball really well. But there are, the 2019 and 2021 seasons that make you worry. So I don't know what we're going to get out of Baker Mayfield next year.
And anybody who says they do, I think is a little misguided. Who knows? I think the Browns think he can be better. The other thing that I'll say, and we'll move on to this trade scenario thing in a minute, I think he got to the point where he was not trusting what he saw. So it was delaying everything, and that was the real problem. Is this guy's open? Is he really open? And I think his confidence took a hit. I really think that was it.
Dave, I agree with you. And let me add one quick thing. I do wonder about Baker at the line of scrimmage, okay? Or when he's in shotgun or pistol. I wonder about what he sees pre-snap, because how many times in his 4 years have we seen him audible? I can't recall more than 2 or 3 times, if that, where clearly he was changing a play. And I'm not saying that, you have to change plays all the time, but I wonder if he sees what he's supposed to see. Am I saying it's easy to be quarterback in the NFL? Absolutely not. I can't even imagine how difficult it is. But I'm saying, judged by your peers, it looks to me like the elite quarterbacks in this league, or even the high end, not necessarily elite, they are able to assess what's going on pre-snap better than Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and the question that I have is, does the scheme allow him to do that? And those are all things that we'll find out. All right, this one from the Bleacher Report. Blockbuster trade scenario. Browns receive Russell Wilson. Seahawks receive Baker Mayfield, 2022 first-round pick, 2023 first-round pick, 2024 first-round pick. In order for this to happen, Russell Wilson would have to waive his no trade and say that he was coming to Cleveland. Would you do it? I was a little hesitant on the because that's a lot to give up. That's a lot of draft capital to give up. Russell Wilson's 33. But, man, when you look at Russell Wilson's body of work, yeah, I would do it.
You know what? I love Russell Wilson, but there's no way the Seahawks do that. Because the Seahawks are going to get a better package than that. If they don't want our has-been, Baker Mayfield, they're like, what? Oh, well, why would we want the Bake Show when you guys are bailing on him after 4 years? And he's in his mid-20s, and you're getting rid of this guy, and you want us to take him and reheat him? No, so I think Seattle would get a better offer and therefore would back away from the table. But would I like to see Russell Wilson? Yeah, of course I would.
What would it take to get Russell Wilson? You think it's 3 first-round picks?
A better quarterback coming back to the Seattle Seahawks, or certainly a quarterback coming off of a better year than Baker had in 2021. Because, again, we have to remember there's 2 teams in this, not just one.
Well,
the other team's looking at this going, why would we want to take on Baker Mayfield? He might not even be our starting quarterback in 2022.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, Russell Wilson is off of one of his worst years as well. And he's 33.
That's true, but the reason a lot of us love Wilson, including you and I, Dave, is he has a legitimate NFL resume. I mean, he's been around long enough to put up some really good numbers. I mean, I submit he's headed to the Hall. And so that's the big difference here. And it doesn't, even though he was injured, it was a finger injury. It's not like he's broken down. So I think Russell Wilson still has, I would say, 3 to 5 prime years left in his career.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And when I looked at it, that kind of is where I arrived at. Yeah, if they can get Russell Wilson, go do it. The D-man, Dennis Manoloff, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. We'll look at a different blockbuster trade and a mock draft. Also another voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
Time for us to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one, again, about the Browns quarterback.
Okay, my comment is about everybody making up excuses for Baker Mayfield and his injury to why his did the well he did or whatever and this and that. But it seemed to appear to me that nobody is seeing the real reason is his decision making. Would he do? That's where the inconsistency comes from. He's an average quarterback. he's a named quarterback, but he's an average quarterback. You take away like what Baker Mayfield did in the past 3 or 4 years, and then you look what Joe Burrow done in 2 years, and you could tell the difference. It always comes down to where you make a decision what you're going to do on the field and off the field. What you do on the field really is the leader of the team. So, like, my opinion is, I mean, I don't have nothing against Baker Mayfield, but like I said, the guy, he makes bad decisions on the field when he quarterbacks this team. Now, that's my opinion.
All right, as always, appreciate the voicemail. And there's some truth to that. The D-man, Dennis Manoloff, I get where he's going with the decision-making. There are times where you kind of go, what is he thinking? But I would slow down with the comparisons to Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow has T. Higgins, he has Tyler Boyd, he has Jamar Chase this year, and that makes a difference. Go get some weapons that threaten a defense in the passing game. And people are going to say, well, Odell was here. Odell didn't want to be here. The Odell that's playing in Los Angeles does not look like the Odell that was wearing an orange helmet here.
Yeah, and first of all, let me say about Baker off the field, I've got no issues with Baker Mayfield off the field. I think he's been fine, and he does charity work and all that stuff, and I know we like to poke him when he has all those progressive commercials and he doesn't play well, but realistically, I don't think his off the field stuff is in any way, shape, or form affecting what he's doing on the field, and I think he comes to camp ready to go, and I think he comes to camp in pretty good shape. So I don't have any issues there. As far as on the field, there's no doubt. You would think he could get some help from Kevin Stefanski, his head coach, and play caller, also Alex Van Pelt, the OC. He needs better receivers for sure. But what you said, Dave, about Odell Beckham Jr. is the fascinating point, because you sit there at the end of the season, you say, well, the Browns need a number one wide receiver. That needs to be their target heading into the offseason, whether it be preferably the draft or perhaps free agency. Well, they had one. They had a number one wide receiver, and it didn't work out, specifically in the Stefanski era. Odell Beckham Jr.'s productivity under Stefanski was average at best in the 2 seasons that he played for Kevin Stefanski. Then the question is why? Well, as Dave said, Odell Beckham Jr. didn't want to be here, but how did he get to the point where he didn't want to be here? In my estimation, perhaps he saw the same things happening in 2021 as were happening in 2020 with his game and his lack of contribution to it. And he said, you know what? I don't want to go through a full season again like this. Get me out of here. And if they choose to cut me, thank goodness, then I'll be on my way. But the Browns, as we know, could have sat on him the entire year. And they could have said, we're going to pay you to stay home the rest of the year, and punished him, if you will. So until the Browns come up with a satisfactory answer as to why the Beckham situation didn't work out, in other words, perhaps part of the problem was the antiquated offensive scheme. The offensive scheme that's trapped in the 1980s and 1990s with tight end and running back heavy stuff. If that's part of the problem, then Beckham wasn't as to blame as we might think. And so I think it's a organization-wide look in the mirror as to what went wrong with this passing game.
Yeah, and you got to get that answered. You have to answer that before you can really answer the quarterback question as well. All right, another blockbuster trade scenario, and this fits into what we're talking about. Browns get Calvin Ridley. Falcons receive conditional 2023 second-round pick. I run and go do that, assuming Ridley checks out. Now, he stepped aside from football to kind of focus on his mental health by his own admission, so he didn't play a lot of this year. Assuming he's good to go and wants to play football again, that's number one wide receiver.
Yeah, but that's the big assumption, though. Where is Calvin Ridley's head? Does he, how committed is he going to be? Do you want to turn over the keys that are, required of a number one wide receiver to a guy who's coming off the type of season that Ridley's coming off of? He is incredibly talented, no doubt. But I mean, if you were going to tell me, all right, you could bring Ridley in as a complementary piece coming off of what he's coming off of and the mental part of it with how he relates to his desire, I'd be more comfortable with that. But if you're telling me, hey, I want to go get Calvin Ridley because I want him to be my number one, I'm going to hesitate. And quite honestly, I know this isn't Ridley's fault, but I'm a little bit hesitant about making deals with the Falcons in general when it comes to pass catchers, because the last time the Browns did that, we were told Austin Hooper was a transformative tight end, and he's been nothing but milquetoast. So I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe some other team.
I thought you were going to go Julio Jones on us for the draft there when you started talking. I thought you were going down that road.
Yeah.
All right, before we go to break, a 2-round mock draft. Jordan Reed from ESPN.com has the Browns taking Treylon Burks, wide receiver at 13, and Drake Jackson, USC edge. And again, this is with Devontae Wyatt from Georgia being taken by the Ravens the very next pick. So I get that they would address the edge. What do you think of Burks? I'm intrigued by him. I haven't seen a lot of him play because I don't see a lot of Arkansas football, as I said yesterday. What I have seen is a big guy that can run, and his run after the catch is pretty good. All of those things intrigue me for the Browns and this offense.
Dave, do you have the first 12 picks in front of you from that mock draft? Because if London and Wilson...
No, different London. So it's an edge rusher. It wasn't Drake London. It was Drake Jackson. There's 2 Drakes from USC.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, my preference would be London or Wilson at that 13 spot. But, yeah, I don't know too much about the Arkansas young man. But clearly the Browns need to resolve their wide receiver question, because, unfortunately, it was such a strength going into the season. I mean, I say unfortunately because of how it unraveled. But it was such a strength going into the season. You're looking at Odell, you're looking at Jarvis, Hollywood Higgins, the security blanket for Baker, the emerging Donovan Peoples-Jones. By the end of the season, Odell's out. Jarvis is, I don't know where Jarvis is, but he was banged up and was, mediocre when he was out there. A pro's pro, but he just wasn't producing anywhere near to the level that he's supposed to. Peoples-Jones was emerging, okay, fine, here and there, but he wasn't a steady contributor. And Hollywood Higgins had disappeared, for all intents and purposes. So they definitely need to upgrade significantly in the wide receiver room.
The D-Man, Dennis Manoloff from News Radio, WTAM 1100, and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Another one about Baker Mayfield. Sports for CLE will continue. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns. We head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Another one about the quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Hey, it's Tony again. Again about Baker Mayfield. You can give the guy all the weapons you want. Go back and watch any of the highlights. He doesn't hit the open receiver. It's like his ability to process information that let's be realistic, 2.5, at the most 4-second window, he's fixated on one receiver. That's his biggest issue. Yes, he has an arm. Yes, he can scramble. Yes, he can have explosive plays, and he can do all types of things. But his processing ability is what's in question here. I really feel that if he had a better processor, and as far as that goes, he could have been signed to the biggest contract. But, give him all the weapons you want. He still has to get the ball to him. And, I have to go on with what Mary Kay said a little while back, that his ability to survey the field is just not up to par with the competition in our own division. I mean, you got a guy, Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall pick, and he's making Baker Mayfield look like, well, why did we even think about picking him? Just let me know what you guys think.
All right. As always, appreciate the voicemail. And I said this earlier, D-Man, I think Baker lost his confidence, didn't trust what he saw as the season went along last year. He looked, before he threw the interception against Kansas City, ball was coming out quick, he was making decisions, and then, again, that's the first game of the year. I think he kind of lost his confidence and didn't trust what he saw. But I get that is something that the Browns have to figure out. Is that a problem? There are questions that he brings up that are legitimate.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that there is such a thing as a recency bias, and right now we in Cleveland are going through a difficult time because we are processing the quarterback play that we've seen in this postseason. It is so recent; it's right on top of us. And of course, the 2 quarterbacks remaining, Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow, are 6-0 in the playoffs, and they played really well for the most part. I know the total QBR for Burrow in a couple of those games wasn't all that great. I think for Stafford, one of them wasn't. But, you loved what you've seen from both those guys for the most part. So we are going through that part of it where if we stepped away for a couple of months later, we might not have as much angst. But that said, it's okay to say, well, gee, if this is the standard, how close is Baker to the standard? I got to say, Dave, and to the voicemail of Truth or Reason and to the worldwide audience, I had a discussion the other day with a buddy of mine who knows football pretty well. And he said he thinks Baker Mayfield would be best suited for the open attack, not necessarily the 5 wide, but certainly not the running back, tight end heavy personnel, that he thinks Baker is best in the not the street ball format, not the unstructured format, but he's best in the wide open thing, and that he would make his best decisions quickly, and he would love to be able to play that wide open offense. But that's not coming from a source close to Baker. That's just my buddy assessing Baker Mayfield's game and where he thinks Mayfield could thrive the best. That the more structure you put on Baker, maybe the less effective he is. But my counter to that was, in 2020, he clearly was under a lot of structure, and he had Hunt, and he had the Chubb, and he had the tight ends. And you know what? He performed pretty darn well in the Kevin Stefanski system. So it's not a guarantee that if you opened up the offense and you let him sling it and get back to that Oklahoma gunslinger, that he would be successful. But that's what my buddy was suggesting.
Yeah, there's some thought that if he's in the shotgun and you can see things develop, that kind of plays to his strengths a little bit more. All right, before we go to break, this one's from the Pat McAfee Show, and Marshall Faulk talking about looking and watching OBJ with the Rams.
What about Odell Beckham? Do you like his whole transition, getting there? Maybe took a couple games to get. Like, did you expect this? Like, he seems to be like the Rams are like Hollywood. They feel like this is what they should be. They have big time players. They're in the Super Bowl. It's like a home game now. Like, this is what the Rams, I feel like, should have, like, high-profile players, and Odell seems to be loving it. He and Vaughn, I mean, love watching those guys post-game pressers. They can't get enough.
Let's be real. We're laughing at the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, you got it wrong. Cleveland, aren't we?
They suck.
Let's be real.
Well, especially after Jarvis Landry goes in there yesterday in that press conference, he goes like, "Hey man, we're all pulling for you guys. Hey, way to go, man. Way to get the hell out of here through a dad Instagram post." By the way, OBS deserves.
Hats off. GM.
OBS maybe deserves a ring too whenever you guys win this entire thing, but he has instantly fit in here. What do you think it is about the team?
Listen, I'm thinking, I'm like, in Cleveland, when they didn't have a Cooper Kupp or a Higbee or a Jefferson, they couldn't find a way to get Odell the ball, and now he's fitting in, and they find ways to get him the ball, like with no problem.
That's a question the Browns are going to have to answer as they try to address potentially signing free agent wide receivers. D-Man, that's the reason I bring that up.
Yeah, this is going to be a sticky wicket for the Browns going forward, as they have to explain to a potential free agent wideout why things went south with with the Odell Beckham Jr. That's why it's preferable that they draft a guy so he doesn't really have a choice in the matter. But yeah, there are a lot of unanswered questions surrounding OBJ. How much culpability did he have in this? What's weird about this whole situation, Dave, is that his teammates continue to swear by him. They continue to have his back. They cheer him on from afar. I find that odd at the very least, because if I'm a Cleveland Brown, I'm not happy that he forced his way out. So, but nonetheless, these players that played with him in Cleveland, they love him. So with that, you say, well, how much is actually OBJ's fault? According to these teammates, he was putting the time in. He wasn't sulking, in the locker room or on the practice field. I don't recall too many stories coming out where he was lollygagging during drills. So if he's giving it an effort and he's still not producing to the extent that he has to get out of there, then who is to blame? And how much blame goes to Odell? How much goes to Baker? How much goes to Stefanski? That to me, those are the three main slices. You have to determine what percentage of each slice is occupied by each guy. So it is going to be difficult going forward to lure a stud receiver here if he just got done watching Odell force his way out of Cleveland and go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and the flip side of it is, if you're Kevin Stefanski, you got to figure that out, because we've delineated the thing the Browns need is some explosiveness in that passing game. The D-Man, Dennis Manoloff, and I are going to take one more time out on the other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield and also Jarvis Landry. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Time to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns and quarterbacks.
Hello. I'm a longtime Browns fan, and I just don't want the Browns, I hope they do not draft any more tiny quarterbacks. We need someone that's big, okay, that can throw the ball. It don't do any good to have these little guys as quarterback, especially in the AFC North. Anyway, that's my comment, and I appreciate it very much. My name's Tom Delbrook. Thank you.
All right, Tom, appreciate the call, as always. And, D-Man, there are some that believe that the 6 foot, 6'1", whatever it is, size is part of the issue. It certainly is part of the issue. It's not all of the issue, though.
Yeah, the troubling aspect with Baker is that he's on the shorter side for an NFL quarterback, and he's not particularly mobile. You can deal with the shorter side and the mobility, such as a Russell Wilson or a Kyler Murray. It's very difficult to overcome the shorter side and the lack of mobility. Now, one guy who famously did it is Drew Brees. Okay, you say, well, gee, that's a great guy to look to. That's an excellent focal point if you're on the shorter side of quarterbacks in the NFL. But one of the things about Brees was he threw off his toes a lot. He really stood up tall in the pocket. And what you notice with Baker is he doesn't maximize what height he does have. He sinks a lot and spreads his base a lot more than Brees ever did. So he's throwing from a lower release point. And that becomes an issue with the line and the defenders and all that other stuff. So, and we don't know how much or how little Baker sees as he goes back to pass. Only he can tell that. But I wish that Baker had more ability. Not that he had to be a run-first guy, but a runner enough to keep the defenses honest. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that as part of his game.
Yeah, and again, you have to figure out, can you scheme around it? Is there anything you can do to help him out without question? All right. Before we let you go, we're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one with just a question that is very interesting.
Do you think Jarvis, Landry, and Baker Mayfield want to be in Cleveland and win a Super Bowl here, or do they both want to leave?
And again, D-Man, that's an interesting question. A young viewer with a voicemail, which, again, we'll find out about Jarvis Landry. But the question becomes, do skill position guys want to be part of this offense?
Yeah, I mean, I am just guessing. I don't have sourcing, but I'm guessing as I read the tea leaves that Jarvis Landry has played his last down for the Cleveland Browns. I don't see him coming back at his $15 to $16 million salary next year, given his decline in production. And I want to read an interesting tweet, Dave, from our Cleveland Guardians. Jarvis Landry will have a complicated legacy in Cleveland. He did so much when he first arrived to help create a winning culture, but then he went silent as his best friend undermined what Jarvis helped build. I'll always like JL, but that silence will forever be disappointing. That's an interesting take on it. What will Jarvis Landry's legacy be in Cleveland? Because if this was his last year, it was a losing season. It's not like you could say, well, Jarvis helped restore the winning culture, unless the Browns are able to back up, the 2020 season with a 2022 quality year. So it remains to be seen if Jarvis can point someday down the road to, hey, I helped turn this franchise around. Because if the Browns come back with another losing season in 2020, then is there a winning culture that was instituted? But as far as Baker, does he want to be here? I think Baker knows his best chance to get paid and his best chance to win is to try to replicate what happened in 2020 with Kevin Stefanski running the offense and Alex Van Pelt, but also with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And so I think that Baker Mayfield would want to be here. Jarvis, whether he wants to be here or not, I don't think is going to be here.
Yeah, and Jarvis, that's a tough one. He may not want to be here, just based on how it's gone the last year for him. And the Browns are probably going to want to restructure. And if I'm Jarvis, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to restructure the contract. So we'll see. D-Man, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Where can we hear you next?
WTAM tonight after the Cavs game, and then big show on Thursday night, the Big Game Roundtable. So that'll be exciting.
All right. As always, Dennis, great stuff. D-Man, you can listen to him tonight and then Thursday. News Radio, WTAM 1100. Thanks so much, Dennis.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, we're going to shift our attention to the Cavs. First game for Caris LeVert in the Wine and Gold will be tonight. Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast will join us. Sports4CLE returns talking Cavs. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to try-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
Time to turn our attention to the Cavaliers getting ready to face the Spurs. Caris LeVert due to be on the court with the Cavs tonight for his first game in the Wine and Gold. J.B. Bickerstaff talked about what the LeVert trade means in terms of where the team is in its rebuild.
We've taken, some time and had to be really patient through some difficult times to get to where we are. When you're talking about, legacy and all those things, I think, those are discussions that you have after the season or, 2 years from now when you can look back at a total body of work and see what you've truly done. I think it's too soon for us at this point. Again, our young guys and our team in general has improved, and it's because of those guys and the work that they've put in and the time that they've put in and how much they've been willing to do it together that, we are where we are now, but we're not done. We're not complete yet. This piece obviously is a huge piece of what we're trying to do. You have to be moving in the right direction to be willing to give up picks, to bring a guy in. So, again, our front office does a phenomenal job of communicating around the league. But again, it's a credit to all our guys' work that we are in this position.
Let's welcome in Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. And Evan, a couple of things about that. It sends a message to the team, this LeVert trade, that you're doing what we want to do. We believe in you. And also, by doing it ahead of the deadline, you get an extra 2 or 3 games with Caris LeVert. That can mean a lot the way the Eastern Conference is bunched together in the top 6.
Yeah, it really does. I think right now with Brooklyn and Philadelphia kind of in a standoff for the James Harden trade, it really, you can't put full scope on where the Eastern Conference stands post-deadline. We'll have a clear idea 3 p.m. on Thursday, maybe a little bit after that, just because some trades will sprinkle in after that. But I think this is a power move on the Cavs' part to kind of consolidate some of what they've accumulated in terms of assets to cash in on what is a promising season. And like Bickerstaff said, his young guys have really put them in this position. They've really built a lot of momentum and positive momentum going forward. And I think Caris LeVert's a good fit for this team. And he said all the right things during his media availability after Bickerstaff spoke. But I think it's refreshing that Bickerstaff isn't looking long-term. He's trying to stay in the moment, remain present with what's in front of them. And I think right now just their focus is the Spurs. And they aren't thinking, okay, well, what are the playoffs going to be like? What are possible championship implications going to be like if they get that far, God willing? They're focusing on right now. They're focusing on getting Caris LeVert acclimated, and it's a good move.
Absolutely, and we can focus on what other things might happen. This is from Bleacher Report. It's one trade idea for every team before the deadline. Cavs receive Robin Lopez, and they give the Magic Kevin Pangos, Ed Davis, 2026 second-round pick. Important to note, Pangos is a guy that the Cavs reportedly will likely waive if they can't find a trade taker. This is kind of the package, Pangos, Davis, second-round pick, that the Cavs and Kobe Altman are kind of seeing what they can get out there. I'm not sure Robin Lopez is what they would most like to get for that. I don't see Robin Lopez as a good fit, but I could see a package with those 3 assets getting a lower level guy. You know, not a Caris LeVert, not a great guy, but a backup point guard or somebody that fills a role they're looking to fill.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. They need to find a backup point guard. No disrespect to Rajon Rondo, but he is in his mid-30s, has 15, 16 years worth of mileage on his body at this point. I think you need to look at maybe not a younger option per se, maybe a guy in his mid to late 20s who can just be a little bit more reliable, somebody you can play in longer stints of minutes, especially if Darius Garland's back becomes a long-term issue for this team, because he is the engine that kind of makes this team operate. And when he's not out there, if you don't have a point guard who can play reliable minutes, it gets ugly fast for Cleveland. But I don't hate the trade necessarily if Cleveland is able to say or have a clear idea of what the buyout market's going to be like, because as soon as the trade deadline's over, there's going to be probably quite a few players that get bought out. I think Goran Dragic, if he isn't traded by Toronto, he'll be bought out. Like you noted, Kevin Pangos is a bit of a trade asset. It's been reported that if he's either waived by Cleveland or the team that acquires him will waive him, he plans on signing with a team in Moscow, Russia, and just returning overseas because his NBA stint just didn't work out. I don't think he has the juice to be an NBA caliber player. Ed Davis, like you said, is also another trade asset. I think you can add Dylan Windler in there maybe to sweeten the pot a little bit just because he's a younger wing who maybe just needs a fresh start somewhere else other than Cleveland because he's just not finding minutes in this rotation with the Cavs. I think finding a backup point guard, maybe another wing would be ideal, because if you look at the buyout market, I've heard kind of some rumblings that the Pacers are going to fully embrace their younger players, and they're really only focused on keeping Tyrese Halliburton from Sacramento. It's been reported that they're willing and able to flip Buddy Hield, and I think they're going to probably buy out Tristan Thompson's contract. And in the event that happens, I don't think you trade for Robin Lopez. You just sign Tristan Thompson with one of the exception money you have or the little bit of money you have, so you're not bumping up against the luxury tax threshold so much, because you have a guy who wants to be here, has a history here, has a good relationship with a lot of players in the locker room, and was a pretty positive impact veteran during his time with the Cavs.
Yeah, and we'll get into that buyout market in a little bit. There's a couple other names that I'll throw at you. All right, this again, according to Bleacher Report, Cavaliers trade predictions ahead of Thursday's deadline, and it's almost like a punch list. So they say field offers for Colin Sexton, but the Cavs keep him. Shop for a shooter, and sacrifice for a second-round pick. Sacrifice another second-round pick. I would imagine, and tell me your opinion of this, I would imagine they would have to be somewhat overwhelmed in order to deal Colin Sexton at this point. It would have to be, man, that's a really good deal for Colin Sexton, because I think they truly do want to keep him and build around him.
Yeah, I think he is a key piece of what they're trying to build. Culturally, especially, I think he is just a talented 3-level scorer. There's probably going to be teams who might be willing to take a gamble on him. I think the Cavs would like to retain him and probably sign him to some type of contract this offseason because they couldn't come to terms on an extension before the season started. And, yeah, I just don't see him being traded at this point.
All right, before we head to a break, do you think the Cavs do anything else? Obviously, it's not going to be – I shouldn't say obviously. I don't think it's going to be as big as Caris LeVert. Do you think they do another deal before the 3 o'clock deadline tomorrow?
I think they do. I think they need to just address that backup point guard position, because Darius Garland has been with this team for 3 years now, and he's never had – no disrespect to Matthew Dellavedova or Dante Exum, but they weren't quality backup point guards. They finally had one in Ricky Rubio, and they lost him for the year. Rondo was a bit of a bridge just to get them through having Garland out with COVID and then losing Rubio at the same time. I think they're very aware of this. I've heard quite a few times that they're trying to pry Dennis Schroeder from Boston because he's not in their rotation anymore, and they're just trying to get him in Cleveland because I think Schroeder would just be the perfect backup point guard for Garland. If not there, maybe look in other avenues as well. But I think there's options out there, but I think there's at least one move, but like you said, it's not going to be a big splashy one, but it's going to be one that just kind of rounds out the rotation and provides some stability just on the court for them.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same way, and I think they value Rondo. They just don't want him to play a ton of minutes. They want him around and in the young guys' ears, and you know, if he plays 10, 15 minutes a game, that's probably the sweet spot for him. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. It's just like I said, he has so much mileage on his body. He's dealing with a hamstring issue. I think it's telling that when Garland was first out with his back injury, they started Jetty Osman, not a point guard at point, and they kept Rondo strictly on the bench. And then they started Brandon Goodwin, a guy who went undrafted, is on a two-way contract, who played with the Charge last night over Rondo as well. I know he had a hamstring issue, and I know he's still trying to build familiarity with the team, but I also just think he physically could not play 35 to 40 minutes just at this point in his career.
Yeah, I agree with you. But again, he's a valuable thing because this team is so young, and those young guys respect what he has to say and believe in him. Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we continue talking Cavs. We're going to look at Jarrett Allen. I think he got snubbed for the All-Star selection. We'll give you some facts about that as well, and potential buyout markets, who the Cavs might be looking at. Sports4CLE continues talking Cavs with Evan Dammarell after this timeout.
On July 5th, 1947, just 11 weeks after Jackie Robinson first plays with the Dodgers, Larry Doby becomes the first African-American to play in the American League, and play Doby does. During his 13-year career, Doby clubs 253 home runs, plays in 6 All-Star games, and leads the Indians to 2 World Series. His number 14 hangs with other legends, the pride of the Cleveland Indians, Larry Doby.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Cavs with Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. We're going to shift our attention to the All-Star game briefly. So in the last 40 seasons, only 2 players have had 15-plus points, 10-plus rebounds, and shot 65% from the field. As it is now, midway through the season at the All-Star break, Jarrett Allen is averaging 16 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks a game, and shooting 68% from the field. We call that an all-star snub here in Cleveland. And again, there's a lot of deserving guys, Evan. I think the answer for this is they need to expand the rosters to about 15. Don't go crazy with it, but is it really going to matter if guys play 20 or 25 minutes? Get it to 15. That way you're opening it up 3 spots on each squad, and you're getting more of the guys that have had all-star type seasons the respect that they deserve.
I absolutely agree. I think you need to expand the rosters because when you look at the All-Star nominations, yes, it's a fan event at the end of the day. You want the fans to enjoy the spectacle of the event, especially when this is the first true All-Star event post-COVID because they had to relocate last second to Atlanta from Indianapolis. And J.B. Bickerstaff kind of hit the nail on the head when he first called Jarrett Allen a snub, saying that the league should reward winning, and the Cavs are one of the winningest teams in the league this year. Like you mentioned at the top before we started chatting, they're only 1.5 games out of first place in the Eastern Conference. It's great they got Darius Garland as a representative, but they deserve to have someone else in the team for them. And I think just unless there's another injury, you don't want that because at the end of the day, don't want to say any of these players are undeserving because they're some of the best players in their craft in the world. You just need to expand the roster and reward more players for this because I think 15 is just more feasible. And like you said, it's not like these guys are going to be playing 25, 30, 40 minutes a night in what is a glorified scrimmage that becomes serious in the last 5 minutes. The players start playing defense because there's a little bit of money on the line. So expand the roster. It makes it more fun for everybody. It makes it way more entertaining. And unless there's another injury, I think Jarrett Allen's just going to be watching the game from either the sidelines or at home.
Yeah, and you know what? He's had an all-star caliber season. I don't think anybody could argue with that. So I think the best solution, expand it. There's always 2-3 guys that feel like they're snubbed, and when you look at it, they probably legitimately feel like they should feel like they're snubbed. All right, let's turn our attention to the buyout market. So you mentioned Tristan Thompson, former Cav. Here's another one I want to throw at you. There's some talk that Eric Bledsoe, that's a point guard who is, Portland traded for. He's likely to get bought out, is what a lot of people are reporting. His agent is Rich Paul, Clutch Sports, guy that the Cavs are very familiar with. Do you think they have any interest in a guy like that if the price is right?
Yeah, if the price is right, I don't see why not. Eric Bledsoe makes a lot of sense as a JB Bickerstaff type player, and I mean that in the nicest way possible, but Eric Bledsoe is a player who plays defense first and is committed to team concepts, and I don't think would really ruffle a lot of feathers. And like we mentioned with Rondo, it's valuable to have another key veteran in the locker room, maybe to be in the ear of like someone like Isaac Okoro, who is one of the future elite defenders for this Cavs team. Maybe Bledsoe can kind of teach him some tricks and some concepts and things that maybe Okoro just didn't have a firm grasp of. Yeah, Bledsoe wouldn't be a player I hate at all, especially if the price is right. And like you said, the Cavs have a very good working relationship with Rich Paul. That Colin Sexton's a client of his, Darius Garland's a client of his. Obviously, LeBron has been here for a while, was a client of Rich Paul's, and so is Tristan Thompson and Jarvis. So the Cavs have a history working with Rich. He is very familiar with Cleveland as well. He tries to set up his clients nicely here. So I wouldn't hate the Eric Bledsoe addition at all. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Now, we also briefly touched on flipping Buddy Hield. That would probably take more assets than the Cavs have at this point. That would probably, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing they'd be looking for a young player that the Cavs don't want to part with, an Okoro or a Sexton. That would be a guess.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that one. It's also the money that's tricky. Hield is just making too much at this point, and unless you're willing to part with Lauri Markkanen as just the starter of the trade, then you have to lump in either Sexton or Okoro. I think that's just a non-starter for Cleveland at this point. If you're just trying to make a move for the sake of making a move, like we talked about adding a shooter, like the Bleacher Report talked about adding a shooter, and we discussed it as well as just a possible target. I think if you look at buyouts, Gary Harris makes a lot of sense. My good friend Nikias Duncan wrote a story about this for Basketball Insiders, and he talked about how Gary Harris really functioned really well and how Cleveland operates their offense, especially how they facilitate the ball through their big men, and you have Harris spotting up in the corner and on the perimeter. If Orlando buys him out, I would not be opposed to Cleveland taking a stab at him. He's a little bit of a younger guard too, not as durable per se, so you can't really rely on him on a night-to-night basis if he just has a quick bug or an issue or something. But I think that's a player that they could explore if he's bought out by Orlando.
All right, before we go, let's do one more topic. So JB Bickerstaff was asked yesterday what the Cavs scouting report is on the newest Cav, Caris LeVert. Take a listen to JB Bickerstaff.
I mean, obviously he was coming off that 42-point night. So, when you're watching that film, you got to be on high alert. But, it's the silkiness of his game and how he can manage to get by his guy. And it's like at an offbeat rhythm, so guys who are defending him don't know, when he's going to go, when he's going to stop, his ability to get all the way to the rim, make the pull-ups. He's a tough shot maker. So, it's really difficult to game plan for a guy like that.
And, Evan, when I heard J.B. Bickerstaff say that, I'm like, that's exactly what this offense kind of is lacking. That's one of the reasons that you talk about the fit with Caris LeVert. There probably wasn't a guy that they were going to be able to get without giving up a key piece other than Caris LeVert that fit as well as he did.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it's interesting when Bickerstaff, he couldn't publicly comment on it the night they played Indiana because the trade hadn't been finalized. That was when he could first publicly speak on it. But he did mention that Caris LeVert Rajon Rondo, mentioned that Caris LeVert was the number one player on the scouting report because he had such a big night the other night for the Pacers. But I think it's really refreshing to see what he brings to the table. I asked JB about it a little bit myself, and because Caris LeVert is a very elite player in the pick and rolls, and Cleveland has an overabundance of big men in Devin Mobley, Jared Allen, Larry Markkinen, and even Kevin Love as well. And I think that potential to just kind of add a new dimension and wrinkle to their offense is really, one, going to help Darius Garland a lot, but two, unlock a lot of things, like you said. And it's just something the Cavs have been lacking ever since Colin Sexton went down early in the year, and especially after Ricky Rubio went down against New Orleans.
Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Evan, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it. As always, great stuff.
No, thanks for having me. I always appreciate you guys asking me.
All right, Evan Dammarell, make sure you listen to it. Locked On Cavs podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, Jeff Phelps from 92.3 The Fan, Cavs pre and post and halftime shows on Valley Sports. And Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. That's tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.